Hi, good morning, and thank you for joining us for our session today. My name is Shantae White, and I am the Senior Research Associate for IWPR's Student Parent Success Initiative. We're very excited to welcome you to our workshop presentation entitled Understanding the Needs and Experiences of Returning Student Parents in the Context of COVID. We'll be sharing national, state, and student parent perspectives. Just a quick overview of our agenda before we get started. We'll get started with my colleague Susanna, who will provide research and highlights from IWPR's Busy with Purpose report. Then I'll be sharing some of preview highlights from an upcoming brief that we have that focuses on state policy actions and their impact on student parent success in the context of COVID. Then we're really excited today to be able to hear some student perspectives, specifically from a rising student parent, a student parent expert. Ms. Christina Clinton is going to join us to share her story and talk about lots of different facets of her experience being a parenting student during the pandemic. In the end, we will end or conclude with a Q&A and discussion with you all, which we're really excited for all of those sections. I want to take a few minutes to introduce my co-speakers or co-presenters. Susana Contreras-Mendez is a research associate with the Institute for Women's Policy Research. She's on the Student Parent Success Initiative team with me. I'm Shantae, again, the Senior Research Associate. And our other co-presenter today is Ms. Christina Clinton, who's our student parent expert. And for those who may not be quite as familiar with IWPR, we are an economic research think tank located in Washington, D.C., and we focus on generating ideas that build empowerment and equity for women. Again, we are from the Student Parent Success Initiative team, and the Student Parent Success Initiative conducts research and communicates research, provides technical assistance, builds partnerships, all in the name of lifting up the parenting student and increasing equity in higher education. A few housekeeping reminders really quickly. We are using the chat feature for any type of responses. And so we would love to know who's in the room with us. If you all could introduce yourselves using the chat, just provide your name and any identifiers such as like title or position and what organization or institution that you may be from. That would be awesome. We'll use the Q&A feature for questions. So please direct all your questions to the Q&A box. As a reminder, also, all mics are muted. Closed captioning is provided, and the presentation will be uploaded to the platform following the symposium, so you'll be able to access it. Now I'm very excited to turn it over to my colleague, Susana Contreras-Mendez, who is going to share some highlights from IWPR's Busy with Purpose report.
Good morning, everybody. Can you see me? I don't see myself. I don't see myself, but I'm good. All right. So as long as you can see me, that's good. As Shantae shared, my name is Susana, and I'm part of this busy team. And today I'll be sharing IWPR's new research that highlights recommendations from our Busy with Purpose report and provides lessons for education and policy leaders from returning student parents, including our very own Christina. This work is co-authored by my colleague and IWPR's SPIZY team managing director, Lindsay Regland-Cruz. And jumping into kind of our report and analysis and some of the limitations within this work that we did. While much of the work to serve and understand adult learners acknowledges that pregnancy and parenting can be a salient factor for adults' post-secondary experiences, relatively little attention is paid to understanding the distinct experiences and needs of adults with some college credit who are also parents within the literature. In addition to the literature review that we conducted, researchers also conducted a series of 11 interviews with student parents who paused their educational journey for at least a year. These interviews, we just want to note, however, took place between May and August of 2020. So as many of you are well familiarized with, this is the beginning of when the pandemic was first unfolding. So a lot of the nuances and the conversations that we have were kind of uncertain, but of the 11 interviewees that we had the honor of talking to, 7 had re-engaged with their college careers since they initially paused their studies. 5 of the participants had attained an associate's degree since re-enrolling. 4 of the interviewees are still contemplating the right time to return. 9 interviewees were mothers, including 6 who were single mothers at some point during their enrollment, and 2 were married fathers. 5 had 3 or more children, 4 had attended at least 3 or more colleges, and at least 4 had taken a break from enrollment of more than a decade. While not all interviewees chose to identify their race and ethnicity, 3 student parents identified as Latino or Latina, 3 identified as Black, 2 identified as white. Unfortunately, there were no Indigenous, Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander students represented in the study, and there were also no single fathers interviewed. Finally, this report draws from an analysis of the data describing students with children who left college before graduating. The data was pulled from the 2012-2017 BPS, or the Beginning Post-Secondary Longitudinal Survey, describing student parents who leave college before completing a degree or certificate within 6 years of first enrolling. So first off, next slide, we want to understand, where are the student parents? We go to the next slide. There it is. And again, to just provide us a baseline understanding of where student parents are in the US, this map provides the share of student parents by region from 2015 to 2016. And as you can see here, the largest share of student parents is in the Rocky Mountains region, which includes Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Utah, and Wyoming at 27%. IWPR's earlier research has been able to use these regional percentages to get a state-by-state enrollment data for all students, and more specifically for single mothers. Unfortunately, due to data limitations, there is currently no data on the share of student parents in each state. However, it's exciting to note that Oregon did just pass this week Senate Bill 56-4, which mandates public colleges and universities to include parental status identifying questions on forms used to collect demographic data. This is now more important than ever, as college enrollment is down and institutions are struggling to understand or working to understand who's currently enrolled and what enrollment can look like in the near future, post-pandemic. Next slide. An analysis of national post-secondary data shows that over half, or 52%, of undergraduate students with children leave college without completing their educational program within 6 years of their first enrollment, making them nearly twice as likely to leave without a degree than students without children. Understanding why student parents are leaving at twice the rate pre-COVID will help us better understand how to support student parents as the country works to recover and build back a bold workforce and increase post-secondary educational attainment to meet the growing and ever-changing labor market demands. Additionally, researchers found disparities within the student father population, in which 61% of student fathers were leaving within 6 years. When we, as you can see here in the chart, when we disaggregated the data even further, we found single fathers, Black and Latino fathers, and fathers at four-year public institutions experienced higher stopout rates than student parents overall, student mothers, and other student fathers. Insight into why students leave college before completing their experience as adult and parenting students, and what supports could help them re-engage with college or avoid stopping out altogether is vital to increasing their chances of economic mobility and, again, meeting the labor market demands of this changing world post-pandemic. So now the question is, why do student parents pause their studies? Can we go to the next slide? There it is. Well, 4 major themes emerged from our interviews. As you can see here, the first is time poverty. As many of you all know in the room, I know are familiar with, The parents that we spoke with talked about their competing demands of work, caregiving, and school, and the lack of time to complete day-to-day responsibilities. This quote unquote time poverty, as parents describe, often forced many of them to make really difficult and tough choices about where and what to prioritize, especially with their time, and more often than not, how their children always took priority. The second major theme was work and financial demands. Student parents also shared their unique financial situations, where many had mortgages, they received sporadic child support, and were paying for their children's college education in addition to theirs. And additionally, supporting elderly family members, and all this on top of going to school and many, many times working full-time. Federal financial aid, income, public assistance, loans, scholarships, and emergency aid are often either not accessible or sufficient to meet their needs. Another major need that many of you are aware of is the childcare need. Parents described taking advantage of all childcare options available to them to quote unquote make it work. And even though many found childcare costs to be astronomical and unaffordable to remain enrolled, one mother so vividly described her process of finding childcare as horrendous. Childcare now, given the COVID pandemic, with many centers closing, childcare deserts becoming more and more sparse for students, it's a real challenge and deserves more in-depth analysis. But mainly within the interview that we talked about, it's unaffordable and inaccessible for student parents pre-pandemic and only getting worse now. Family and life circumstances was the final theme that was pulled out, and student parents' educational aspirations are repeatedly set aside to deal with family and life circumstances that are out of their control. Student parents interviewed talked about dealing with domestic violence, homelessness or houselessness, addiction, poverty, and children with special needs or differently able children. However, what was exciting and what we heard about in these interviews is that these experiences often helped to foster their perseverance and persistence, and was able to bring grit into the classroom in a different lens and a perspective. As one of the parents shared, she said, having to work full-time because of my separation from my husband, because of these responsibilities and needs, I just had to put school on hold. I was like, okay, I'll get this one day. Right now, the needs is the kids. And another parent, Wakisha, shared, we have to navigate a lot more with less flexible schedules. And a testament, I'm sure Christina will share a little bit about her experience with that, but we're definitely grateful to have her. She's on the Pacific time and it's super early. So she's excited to hear from her and definitely honored to have her join us. So going back to the report a little bit, understanding, the returning student parent experience. So being able to re-engage the student population that has left college without a degree, yet still has a desire to return is now more important than ever, given the disproportionate impact on student parents during the pandemic. This is particularly true for students of color, students with young children, and those experiencing poverty. Now I would like to share insight from student parents on how institutions can better support their return to college. Again, this research was informed by interviews that took place at the beginning of the pandemic and may not capture all the challenges that come with being a parent during COVID-19. However, as we alluded to later on in the presentation, we will have the opportunity to talk with a student parent to get more in-depth insight into what students with children are dealing with during these unprecedented and trying times. So the returning student parent highlighted their experiences in the following way. Can we go back one slide? They were motivated to achieve their educational and career goals for their children's future. They had more confidence, better time management, coming back as adults and parents. And when they did finally decide to come back, many, again, as we noted, after decades, the systems and policies were not built with them in mind. They faced unique obstacles in obtaining financial aid to meet their needs, and tailored services and peer support networks did provide the much needed support for their return. These parents have a drive and desire to return, and the bottom line is these parents are resilient, they're motivated to finish their degrees, but systematic barriers can hinder their progress and success. Understanding and acknowledging the student parent experience and taking steps to change these broken policies will make the difference in helping students graduate with their degrees. The next four slides are institutional recommendations informed by student parents on how to create a more inclusive environment for their success. The first is increasing access to affordable, high quality childcare. Adrienne shares, as one of our student parents who was interviewed, she shares, there is not enough supports in place to provide quality, readily available evening childcare. There may be 1 or 2 evening providers in the city, but they tend to be full and not ideal. If this was prioritized, more student parents could take advantage of it. Second, provide flexible and tailored supports for navigating systems and aid. Parents are maxing out their financial aid for 2-year degrees. It took me 5 years to get my associate's degree. If I would have known, I would have tapped out of financial aid. I would have done my courses differently and would not have needed to ask for an appeal. This is one of our interviewed fathers, Drayton. Next slide, we have facilitate student parents access to public assistance. Another parent of ours, Bianca, shared, I am thankful to have the Washington State Child Care Connection subsidy, and at one point to have received food benefits and WIC. It was helpful because my son had special needs. And finally, center the student parent in the design of supports. One parent bluntly shared, listen. That is the biggest thing, is people need to listen, because you may think you understand, but that doesn't mean you understand my experience and what my needs are. And now I will turn it over to Shantae, who will talk a little bit about our state policy work.
Thanks so much, Susanna. I think many of the experiences and details that are outlined in the Busy with Purpose report highlight the ways, as you mentioned, that student parents are systemically disadvantaged. And so a lot of times that's at multiple policy levels. And the state level in particular plays a role in shaping the student parent experience and also fostering more like systemic change in post-secondary education. The times that we're in terms of the COVID context present a unique opportunity to usher in systemic change to policies and ultimately practices that support parenting students. So we wanted to take a little time today to share a few highlights and preliminary findings from an upcoming brief that focuses on state policy actions that may impact the experiences, access, and success for parenting students in COVID-19 recovery, and hopefully more long-term as well. And so in this brief, we're looking at 4 case states, Florida, Georgia, Texas, and Washington. And the brief is supported basically by thematic analysis of research and literature, and is supplemented by data collected via in-depth conversations with experts from each of the 4 states. And all of this is aimed at just getting a greater understanding of each state, each state's landscape and policy landscape, and figuring out state level actions, again, that will impact parenting students. The time today is brief, so we're gonna focus on 3 key policy areas impacting parenting students during the pandemic. As Susanna kind of showed earlier, a lot of the issues that we talk about, policy issues and experiences, were prevalent to parenting students prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has kind of exacerbated certain issues and placed a spotlight on certain areas, including college enrollment and affordability, access to childcare, and also basic needs security. Among, there are other areas that, have been impacted, but these are kind of like the highlights or the key areas that we're going to focus on today. And it's also important to note that when we're thinking about how these areas have been exacerbated, a lot of times these changes in the context of COVID, as most are well aware, have deeply impacted Black and Latinx and Indigenous students more adversely. And so the Busy with Purpose report highlighted the increased likelihood for parenting students to end up, for lots of different reasons that Susanna described, having to leave college at some point. And that also is exacerbated by COVID. And so COVID really disrupts individuals' opportunity to plans to enroll and opportunities to proceed in college. There was a recent study that we just looked at with Child Trends the other day that found that in nearly 75% of households examined, at least with one person who was planning to go to college, they report a change in plans. And so that's a significant number of households who had to shift their plans based on COVID. and decide either to not to enroll or not to re-enroll in some capacity, or change, just their college plans of how they were going to ultimately earn their degree. In 2 of the 4 states that we look at in the brief, policy experts mentioned an issue in this area that was declining FAFSA applications, which they see, and that's the federal application for student aid, which they see as a pretty significant signal, I think, of what fall 2021 could potentially look like. And so still in the context of COVID, enrollment has declined, and there's potential for that trend to continue. And so we wanted to provide some examples of how states have responded and can respond when it comes to college enrollment and affordability. Well, college enrollment first. One thing that we see happening is in Texas, for example, revising state strategic plans for higher education. So the broad statewide goals that support educational attainment are kind of being re-examined in the context of COVID, because enrollment declines have kind of shifted, I think, what's possible. And also because when it comes to some of the issues with the workforce and everything that we've seen happen during COVID, there needs to be kind of new strategy in terms of how to reach ultimate goals, like in Texas 60 by 30 Texas plan, for example. We've also seen in Texas where they have engaged in some strategic activities to try to facilitate enrollment among new and returning students, such as their Future Focused Texas campaign, which provides virtual resources for high school and college counselors to help students access and matriculate through college. And also the Texas Reskilling Support Fund, which provides funding to institutions to basically build programs and provide emergency services to encourage specifically students who have left and are seeking to return, to encourage and support them as they return to college. And so in those 2 examples, one thing that you'll see in the brief is that our recommendation would be to more explicitly focus on student parents in the development of these types of initiatives. Like, the initiatives are important for all students, but again, we always want to remind policymakers and advocates and everyone in our audience that these things need to be developed with student parents in mind. So with regard to kind of attainment goals, we are encouraging policymakers and other stakeholders to actually set or include parental attainment and set parameters around increasing attainment goals and racial equity among parenting populations. We believe those goals should be supplemented with intentional strategies, such as the ones that Susanna mentioned earlier, that guide institutions across regions, because that's really important when we're talking about kind of state level policy, is that there's a lot of nuance and differences by regions. And so those plans should include specific kind of regional supports and ideas for improving equity. We also are encouraging states to develop or enhance existing accountability systems to include student parent metrics, and again, identify regional needs and differences in the student population and supported through data, and hold regions and campuses accountable for making more student parent conscious and race conscious decisions when it comes to improving attainment. When it comes to college affordability, that was of course a major policy issue prior to COVID. And of course that is exacerbated. College affordability and finances is cited as a major reason why students are leaving college or deciding not to return or not to enroll. And now there's some opportunity, like amid the previous state budget cuts that happened as a result of COVID, but with some of the moving forward efforts, some of the federal relief, there's an opportunity to figure out ways to make college more affordable for students. Washington provides an example, Washington State, of using pandemic recovery funds, for example, to supplement their state funding for higher education. Their first allotment that was given to their governor to support education and other priorities through the state, they actually directed the entire thing to their technical college system, which we know that's a space where parenting students are highly likely to be enrolled. Georgia kind of took similar actions, directing a lot of their COVID relief to address issues with student connectivity and broadband access, and also provided funds to bolster the eCampus platform at their technical and community colleges. Again, institutions where student parents are likely to benefit from that increased access to online courses, et cetera. When it comes to affordability, aligned with the American Families Plan at the federal level, we're also looking at encouraging states to develop statewide strategies, including tuition-free community college and college promise programs, but encouraging them to develop those programs in ways that support student parents. Some examples of that are through expanded eligibility criteria, and also by covering the full cost of tuition. And that means tuition expenses and non-tuition expenses, such as transportation, childcare, and other kind of living expenses that are associated with college. As Susanna mentioned earlier, childcare is one of the most prominent policy issues, because it's one of the most prominent barriers that prevents student parents from being able to successfully matriculate through college. So we wanted to provide, and will provide in the brief, an example or a snapshot from each state of what campus childcare looks like. And so on-campus childcare centers in Florida, for example, there are about 22 of those, but they're primarily in the public four-year sector. And then in Georgia, we see that there's less childcare centers. There's only about 12, but they are more evenly distributed across the public four-year sector and the public two-year colleges. In Texas, there, of course, which is a larger state, there are 42 campus child care centers that are more evenly distributed across the public two-year and four-year colleges and universities. And then in Washington, there's 32 campus child care centers, but again, most of them, similar to Florida, are kind of situated within the public four-year college or university setting. And so one of the things I think that's noticeable from those trends is that particularly, there's generally, as we all know, a lack of access to campus childcare. And that is particularly true in states a lot of times at the community college or in the two-year setting. And so we wanted to look at some ways, of course, the states are responding to childcare needs in conversations with policy experts from states, particularly in Georgia. We got a lot of feedback in terms of the broader childcare conversation being more robust than it has been in prior years. And so lots more conversation in the context of COVID around childcare, as we know there was a need before, but that need has really been exacerbated and highlighted during the pandemic as it relates to issues with unemployment, educational access, and workforce skill development, et cetera. Of course, we've seen examples where states like Florida are using COVID-19 recovery and relief funds. A lot of those funds are going towards childcare development infrastructure and expanding access in terms of making sure and fortifying childcare centers and being able to, of course, pay staff, but then also provide subsidies and support for actual parents. And one unique thing that we did find in Georgia is that with the childcare funds that have been allotted through the multiple federal relief packages, Georgia was one of the states that we looked at that specifically reserved funds, and this is due to a lot of advocacy in Georgia for student parents, but they're one of the few states that specifically reserve funds for student parent access to campus childcare. Oh, and another example that I wanted to mention out of Washington is that they just passed recent legislation that would kind of open more doors for childcare. They passed legislation so that parents, both married and single now, can access childcare assistance, and they don't have to worry about meeting the work requirements, which means that they can be enrolled in any certificate or degree program and that meet the requirements to access childcare assistance versus having to meet the work requirements and try to juggle school at the same time. And then our third issue area that we are looking at is basic need and security. And so we know that student parents, even prior to the pandemic, were more likely to face food and housing insecurity. Some research from the Hope Center for Community College, for College Community and Justice found that 53% of parenting students were food insecure in 30 days prior to taking their survey, and 68% were housing insecure, and 17% of those students experienced houselessness or homelessness in the previous year, as compared to non-parents. And COVID, of course, has worsened those conditions, again, a lot of times for parenting students of color. One way we are seeing kind of states respond, a good example was seen in Washington, of streamlining services that are aimed at forming coalitions that are aimed at supporting and providing support for basic needs and also dismantling poverty. Washington State implemented what they are calling a blueprint for a just and equitable future, which they rolled out in the context of COVID, but it's a 10-year plan aimed at dismantling poverty in Washington. And among their strategies, very importantly, is increasing the availability of affordable childcare and housing for student parents on and near college campuses. Some other things we are considering in this area are also, and across areas where we see changes in COVID, are where can some of the relaxed rules and some of the policies that were implemented as a result of COVID, how can those be kept and maintained? Specifically with how states work with in conjunction with the federal government, work to implement and disseminate TANF resources and provide access to SNAP and WIC and other programs. There were a lot of relaxed rules and requirements that resulted of the pandemic that states should consider how can they keep and implement those practices. Some of them are as simple as being able to have an appointment online versus have an appointment in person. There's lots of examples where there may have been a face-to-face requirement before that was eliminated during COVID. And I think it's important to ask, like, do those things need to come back? So kind of in summary, some of the overarching themes that we're finding through these 4 states is that states can potentially catalyze change for student parents by including student parents in statewide goals for educational attainment and any strategic planning that is related to getting students to return to college, enhancing workforce skill and development through like reskilling and upskilling programs and things like that. All of those should be developed with student parents in mind. Investing in campus childcare and expanding the campus childcare availability and opportunities for high quality, affordable care is really important. And then also facilitating increased access to public assistance to help and having strategic plans that include parenting students when it comes to addressing issues with basic needs and security. And so thank you for listening. That's the end of my part. Hopefully across our 2 sections, you're able to kind of see, you know, from a national context, what is going on with parenting students, specifically returning parenting students, and some of their policy recommendations and suggestions for change. And then also some considerations for state level policy, some concerns there and some opportunities where we see states either leveraging or changing policies to impact student parents, or there's opportunities to leverage those policies in the future. And again, that brief will probably be coming out in June or July. Now I want to turn it back over to Susanna, who is going to facilitate our conversation with Ms. Christiana Clinton, who's going to offer some firsthand student experience and perspective on mothering in college during a pandemic.
Thank you, Shantae. And yes, it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Christiana Clinton. She was super instrumental in supporting our work and our research on student parents who have paused their studies at some point in their educational journey, but want to come back. So Christiana Clinton is our student parent expert. She is a mom. She's a student in Washington State. And again, she was instrumental and supportive throughout the whole process of getting our Busy with Purpose report out. And Christiana, I'm excited to share. Please, the floor is yours to share your little bit about yourself, your story. And I just want to encourage folks in the audience, if you have questions for Christiana, please type them in the chat. We will get to those after, Christiana introduces herself and tells you a little bit more about her journey. So yes, please use the chat to ask questions to Christiana. And so now the floor.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Christiana. I'm Christiana Clinton. I live in Washington State. So let's talk about me, which is a really hard thing for me to do. I'm 37 years old. I'm a single mom. I have a 10-year-old daughter. Her name's Olivia. She's 10, going on 45. And she's my pride and joy. I started school while I was pregnant with her, living in the domestic violence shelter. And I gave birth to her on a Tuesday and went back to school 3 days later. I think it was either a Thursday or a Friday to finish a final. And yeah, so I earned my AA degree in 2017. I'm currently taking a break from college this quarter because life happened and I got overwhelmed, as most single parents have experienced during this time. I've attended state universities, and I found that I've had better success in community colleges. I received my AA degree, transfer degree from Skagit Valley Community College. And right now I'm at North Seattle Community College, earning my bachelor's degree in early childhood education. During the pandemic, I moved from my hometown in Oak Harbor to a bigger city in Everett. So I moved off an island for better access for childcare because I was living in a childcare desert. Some of the things that I feel like sharing is I'm one of those children. I'm the first child out of my mom's 4 children that she's raised that has completed college and high school. I'm the only high school graduate in my family. I'm also the oldest. The whole reason why I wanted to go to college is because I wanted to be a nurse, but that didn't exactly pan out for me. So I decided to change to early learning because I decided to listen to my mom and follow my calling, as what she said. So some of the reasons why I've taken breaks from college is one of them was financial aid. It was taken away from me because at the time that at that time, I had a baby, and I was self-advising myself because I didn't have the time or the availability to go and see a counselor to get help, because I was living in a domestic violence shelter, and we have curfew, and we have to be at certain places at certain times, and everything. So that made it difficult to make sure that I had the classes that I needed, even though I got approval from the nursing head it was okay for me to take these classes, because they didn't fit in what the Pell Grant saying what the classes were what classes I was allowed to take. They took financial aid away from me, and I had to repay back for those classes. So I ended up taking a break for 7 years. Well, not 7 years, kind of like 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. It's so long ago. And to earn money to pay that back. And during this time, this was during the sequester. And so Working Connections childcare subsidy was not available to anybody that had children under the age 3.5. So I didn't have childcare at all during the time that my financial aid was taken from me, just because I took the wrong first aid class. Another reason why I've taken breaks is because navigating financial aid and support services, so childcare, disability services, food insecurity services. For the longest time, I didn't know why it was so hard for me to concentrate and focus on my work, and it took a lot for me to do so. And during this pandemic, I broke down, and I was like, I need to figure this out. And it turns out that I had ADHD. So I done this without any supports, and trying to access those supports after getting my diagnosis during the pandemic has been absolute nightmare. Part of the motivation that I wanted to go back to school, and why I'm only taking this quarter off, and I'm told myself this, is because I want to show my daughter that it's okay to have setbacks, and it's okay to fail every once in a while. But as long as we give each other the opportunity to dust ourselves off and stand up and ask for help that we need. And I think that's the most important part, is being able to be comfortable to ask for help, that we'll be able to get the things that we need. And that's part of the reason why I've talked to Susanna and Shantae, is because I do a lot of advocacy work around parents in the state of Washington, especially parent students. I'm a parent of a child with anxiety disorder. I'm also a domestic violence survivor. So is she. And there's a lot of PTSD that goes on. And with this pandemic, it has amplified those feelings. So just think about the communities of people of color and how they feel because of their generational trauma that they've experienced, and being able to access things to get the help that they need. And it's put a lot of things in perspective. So I was part of the families that helped advocate for special work requirements whenever people get working child connection, working child care connection, child care subsidy in the state of Washington. If you have, if you're working on your AA, they've taken that work requirement away from parents, because it's really hard trying to take care of a kid, let alone whenever you're trying to take care of your children, because they know you, and so they push those boundaries and they get really antsy around you. But being able to take care of your children and meet their needs, and meet the needs that their teachers are requiring of them and of you, meeting the needs of work, meeting the needs of your school, meeting the needs of supporting yourself, paying your bills during this time has been increasingly amplified because of the pandemic. And I'm kind of sad that it took a pandemic for people to realize what is happening and what has been happening in these United States for so long, and how the people are being, a whole group of people, a whole generation has been ignored and stifled during this time. I wanted to show my daughter that her time is important too. So while going to school, being in class, I would take my daughter with me, cook dinner with them during the pandemic, with her on the screen with me while we're cooking dinner and taking a lesson. I have pictures of my daughter as a baby going into class with me because there's no childcare available. I have pictures of my daughter in kindergarten going to class with me and passing. I was grateful that I had a teacher that allowed me to bring my daughter into my classroom and allowed her to actually lead a lesson. We're not all that lucky to have that, and trying to find that and trying to find professors that understand our unique situations is really hard, because we often forget that what's hard for us may not be hard for others. And so we often forget that others' experiences is worse for them. And instead of being thoughtful and mindful of what they're going through, we forget, and we often put them down and makes them feel less than. So I don't know what else to say other than that. So sorry.
You do not need to apologize. It is a privilege to be able to bear witness to your incredible testimony, to your story, to your journey. There's so many different, multiple facets of, what helped you succeed, what some barriers were, from little things to having the professor allow you to come in, right, to bring your child to class, little things like that, to real life, implications where you had to move to be able to access childcare and get out of these childcare deserts. You are definitely a strong woman, and we appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable, to have the strength to share these difficult conversations, right? This is not that easy to share, right? And being able to share your educational journey, your life story. And I think what's powerful about it is that you are utilizing that to be an advocate, to be a leader, to push policy change, to push institutional leaders and other student parents to think differently, and to make sure that student parents' voices are at the forefront of these real life decisions that are being made at the national, state, and international level. So thank you. Again, our research could not have been possible without, with you and the other, 10 student parents that helped us, work through the report. And I know that you were instrumental in that, in helping us review it and make sure that what we were saying in the report, it was accurate and reflected what your experience was and our policy recommendations. So we can't thank you enough. We're excited. I also want to note that you are a new fiance. That's a new role that you have. Congratulations. I had to call it out. You shared with us before the webinar, and so we just had to acknowledge that. But we have a few questions from the audience that I'm going to pull first before we go into the questions that I have. But you talked a little bit about both your community college experience. And so I'm going to tie these two questions together. So one person asks you what attributed to your success at the community college level. And then another person asks what factors impeded your success at four-year, but you're not at a current four-year institution, right? Is Seattle?
No, I'm not currently. I went to Idaho State University, and then I went to Grand Canyon University online through, down in Arizona.
Yeah, so maybe can you talk about the different experiences of how success has looked like for you at the community college level, and then maybe some barriers at the four-year institution that you went to that you ended up leaving?
Okay, so I'm gonna say the negative because I always like to leave on the positive. The barriers with a four-year university that I experienced as a parent with Grand Canyon University is their inability to understand that I'm a mom first. I actually had a professor actually tell me that I needed to make a choice of whether I take care of my kid or be part of the class. And this was a really hard time because during this time, when this professor said this, I also had lost my grandmother. And so having someone fall completely on deaf ears whenever I'm saying I'm taking care of my child who has emotional needs, behavioral needs, because my daughter does have an anxiety disorder and we're in the process of figuring out if she has ADHD or is part of the autism spectrum. So I needed my professor to listen to me and to hear me out. I wasn't asking for a hand out, I was asking for a hand up to be able to take care of my child's needs first and make sure she was taken care of. And instead I got a pushback. What's success for me in the community college is I like that the classes are smaller because I myself have problems with being around a lot of people just because of my PTSD and also because of my other neurodivergent things that go on with my sensory with too many people, too much noise that happens. So I've had teachers that have been very understanding, very helpful. My current, I would have to give a shout out if she was on here to my advisor. Her name's Annie Garrett. And she took time to listen to me and to meet me in where I needed to be. And she met me after her work hours or arranged to be after her work hours because her work hours were not matching with mine because during the pandemic, especially during the pandemic, I was earning $2.55 an hour to take care of my sister's children so my sister could continue to work. And I would have my sister's kids, my niece and my nephew, which I love. I would have them for almost 60 hours a week. So finding that time to take just for me was really hard, especially if it was just for me to talk about my progress and how I can succeed better in my class. I was not successful. And so we needed to brainstorm better options for me and make a better plan for my educational goals.
Amazing. Again, things your story encapsulates so much and you really articulate the different multifaceted needs that a student parent has, right? Touching on the mental health, right, aspect, especially now given COVID, how important that access to affordable mental health services and supports and the disability kind of supports as well on campus and how all that kind of intersects. So I definitely acknowledge that. Also, I just want to say you're getting all the kudos in the chat that I think it merits saying them. So you have people saying your resiliency is incredibly impressive. I admire your persistence and survival skills. Thanks for sharing your story. It becomes a reality when it's shared out loud. Your story helps others tell their story. I applaud your dedication to your daughter, persistence in finding the right educational path, and advocacy for other student parents. Success doesn't necessarily always mean obtaining the degree, right? It's progression, not perfection. And you are continuing to progress, and that is success, right? We applaud you for your work, for your effort, for your grit, and for little Olivia who's watching, you know, your every move and your steps and your persistence and perseverance. So let me go back to another question that we had from the audience. We're gonna cut our Q&A a little short, so we're gonna chat with you a little bit longer. So how were you introduced to services for parenting students at the community college that you attended? So you talked a little bit about your advisor and that kind of support, but were there other services for student parents at your community college that were most impactful for you or for your daughter?
Well, there wasn't any. I made it happen. I was very honest and upfront with my teachers. I was like, listen, I do not have childcare and I want to be in this class. So there's going to be times where I will have to bring my child to school with me. I remember when my daughter was an infant, I went to school and I had just got done feeding my daughter the week before, but didn't feed her a week later, the week before I fed my daughter before I went to class, and my mom just blew my phone up. I was only in class for like 20 minutes. She's crying, she won't stop crying. And so that was whenever I decided that there really isn't a policy about children not being in the classroom. It's just frowned upon by a lot of the professors. And I said, I wanted to be successful in this class, and this is part of who I am as a mom. And so I remember going in the next week and being there. And one time I had to breastfeed in class, and I just remember looking at the teacher, and she looks at me and she's like, you're going to go places and you're going to do things. And like having those little, like those words of encouragement instead of discouragement was really helpful for me. And being able to be not stress out so much that I'm a mom, because being a new mom, being a new parent, you're navigating this all, and I was doing it by myself. So like, it was great to have that. And now with Annie, whenever I went into orientation for this, whenever I started at this college, I told her, I was like, I don't have childcare. And she's like, you know what? I understand, you can bring her with you. And so my daughter came with me, and my classmates know that my daughter is a permanent part of who I am. And I think it helped that I'm in the early learning department of college, but I feel like we need to normalize that parents have to parent first. In order to be successful, we need to make sure our home life's successful. And it's really important to see and to model with children what going to school looks like, what studying looks like, what positive interactions with people look like, because because children just see what's on TV, they need to actually see it in life and understand, how to be successful in learning environments, and how to have discussions that would look like arguments or a fight on TV, but how those discussions can actually turn into success in person. So our parents were modeling. And so I feel it's important that children see that in life and not just hear us talk to them about it.
Yeah, I definitely want to underscore the fact that, these institutional policies around having children on campus and in the classroom need to be addressed, especially, the variance from college to college. Student parents may be going to multiple colleges, or maybe, transferring to a college, and the policies might not be the same, or they might not be there altogether. So I just definitely want to underscore that. So I kind of want to take us back a little bit to kind of what's going on right now, given COVID-19 and kind of all that's going on. So you talked a little bit about some of the roadblocks, taking a pause because of the COVID pandemic. You're taking a break now, plan on returning next semester. But what is one thing you wish, so I'm going to question 2, what is one thing you wish your college knew about being a student parent during a global pandemic?
that even though I'm stuck at home, I don't have free time. Like, I wish that was true. With the Working Connections childcare, I don't know how they do it in other states, but before we made the new policy, Working Connections childcare, you had to work certain amount of hours in order to have it, and it had to be covered and everything like that. So being able to sit there and go, like, I have zero free time. I don't have all this time, and really trying to find that time, it takes time. So like, you may want this assignment turned in at this time, but it's not going to happen at all. Because yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a big misconception on, like, if you're home and you're doing school online or things are being done, you have all this free time, and it's like, no, you even though you're at home and doing you still need childcare, you still need X, Y, and Z, and so I think that's important to share. So my next question is, so as you said, you took a break. So what could colleges and other support programs be doing to better support returning student parents with children post-pandemic?
One of the things that I really advocate for is childcare during study time. So some places have childcare. They have childcare during in-class time, but they do not have childcare for parents that are trying to study. And that's where, like, I don't have free time comes from. It's because I'm trying to study, but I have a kid that wants me to make them breakfast, wants me to make them dinner, wants me to, Mom, I made a mess in my bed. Can you help me clean it? Those kinds of things. Mom, I fell down, I have an owie. I wish that they would understand that even though we're home, we're supposed to be studying. I'm doing 4 different things. I'm cooking dinner, I'm doing laundry, folding laundry, I'm vacuuming, cleaning. I'm not just at home looking at a computer all day long.
Yes, that's important where, I just want to note, states vary in how, childcare subsidies are a big part of how a lot of student parents are able to pay for childcare, and how childcare is affordable is through a lot of these state subsidy programs. But it must be noted that these state subsidy programs, their eligibility, right? Can you even use it for education, post-secondary education, or certification? And if you can, what do those hours look like? And is study time included? So some of our work that we're doing with the policy state work is we're actually looking into that on, like, what do these childcare subsidies look like in these 4 states? And how does that impact student parents who want to use this subsidy for educational purposes? And what does study time look like within that? So I think that's an important note to say, is that, yes, you need childcare for class time, but study time, tutoring, and all that is just as important. So I want to see if we have time for one more question. Is there any more in the Q&A? If not, I think, let me see, Shantae, I think we might ask, is there any questions in the audience? Any other questions for either Shantae and I, or for Christiana? We have just a few minutes. I just want to provide the opportunity for any other audience members. Christiana, is there any other questions that you have for us? Anything else that you wanted to share on how, COVID has impacted your journey? Any other questions in your experience and working with us and helping us get this report out and interviewing with us and presenting? I just want to acknowledge again, you're in Washington State and it's super early, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your super busy day to chat with us.
No, I just want to say thank you for being so flexible and mindful, and interviewing all the parents that you interviewed. It was not an easy job, and everything like that. And I just really appreciate, I'm just happy that, it took a pandemic actually, I'm not happy. It's kind of frustrating, but being able to see the work that you guys are doing is just amazing, and bringing to light the study that you guys allowed me and so many other parents to be part of, to show what it really is like being a student parent and not having accessibility to a lot of this stuff, and how that really hinders and how it really affects families of color and communities of color, and especially families that experience poverty. So thank you.
So I am now going to quickly, thank you again, Christiana. We're definitely blessed to have you here. Quickly turn it over to Shantae, who is going to provide the Q&A discussion real quickly. Shantae, are you on?
I am on. Thank you so much. I was sitting here just enjoying listening to Christiana's testimony and listening to y'all's discussion. That was wonderful. So thank you again. We still have just maybe like a few more minutes, maybe time for one audience question. One thing that we did kind of want to discuss, just in case, had some pre-prepared questions, but wanted to discuss like how research and data can be leveraged to actually foster like policy change and practical change to promote success among parenting student populations. And, you know, of course, first sharing the research more widely. The Busy with Purpose report is accessible. I don't know, Susanna, if you have the link handy, you want to drop it in the chat. But the Busy with Purpose report is out and accessible and very helpful. Again, in that report, there are policy recommendations directly from, you know, parenting students themselves that can help institutional leaders in program development and help them kind of develop at least, you know, the foundational frameworks of some initiatives and efforts and interventions on their campuses that are aimed to facilitate success for parenting students. And then with regard to the research, of course, I said sharing and then using it in practice are two important things. And we have some in the Q&A, another question in the Q&A. And I think this is for Christiana. Was your family supportive of your education? And did you experience any emotions being a first-generation college student? Did you experience any guilt or emotions being a first-generation college student? Is Christiana still on? Yeah.
Oh,
I haven't left yet. I'm saying thank you. So today's my grandmother's birthday. She passed away a few years ago, and she was my rock. And she would send me care packages every fall quarter whenever I started school. So through that, I was really truly supported through her and my grandfather as well. Guilt, yes, lots of guilt. I'm a parent. There's so much guilt because you take time and you carve out time to spend time with your kid and your family to do family things, and having and then plans fall through because, you know, life happens, and the disappointment on your child's face because you have to sit there and say, no, plans changed. I need to do this. I think that's the hardest part, is whenever you have to disappoint and break promises because something came up, or because you're having a hard time, or like for me, financially ran out. So like we have to pension together and come up with new ways for me to finish my degree. So, you know, those kinds of things, and putting more financial hardship on my family. That's part where it gets kind of difficult.
Thank you so much, Christiana. Christiana actually is transitioning to work. Again, the prime example in real time of juggling multiple roles. And so thank you so much. I think want to just get ready to wrap it up. We were told that we stand in the way between you all in lunch, and we always know that lunch is important, or breakfast, depending on what time zone you are in, is important. And so one of the things that we were considering kind of ending on would be like describing your vision for student parent success in a post-COVID context. And I think for IWPR, of course, we want to see federal, state, and institutional change that is specifically geared towards acknowledging the lived realities of parenting college students. Christina's testimony is a prime example of that. And just continuing to work towards student parent equity, which also intersects with racial equity, so that communities and families can all have, access to higher education, succeed in higher education, and we could have more equity in that space. And so that concludes kind of our Q&A, and I'll turn it over to Susanna, who is going to just provide closing remarks and talk about kind of next steps for the symposium.
If we can go to the last slide, if you all do have any additional questions, please reach out to us and stay in touch. But thank you all again for joining this session on understanding the needs and experiences of returning student parents in the context of COVID. As a reminder, you will all have a 30-minute lunch break or breakfast, but be sure to make it quick because you do not want to miss the keynote address on One Teen Mother's Journey to CEO and Author with Nicole Lynn Lewis, who is the founder and CEO of Generation Hope, and will begin sharply at 11:45 p.m. Eastern Time. And also, I got to make a quick little plug. Do not forget to grab your copy of her book. I'm going to put it right now in the chat. I got mine, so make sure you get yours. But it's going to be a great, great keynote. And in closing, I want to thank IWPR's co-presenter, Christina, the Ohio State's Access Collaborative staff for allowing us to partake in this year's conference, and for all their support throughout this amazing conference. They've been on point with everything. And again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. And we would not be possible, our research and this work, without the generous support from Imaginable Futures and the Annie Casey Foundation, who are truly committed to investing in improving the post-secondary success of students with children and dependents. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the day.